Hey everyone, Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com, and as you can see, we now review fish tanks. Let's do this. The MSI GTX 1660 Super Gaming X, offering amazing performance at both 1080p and 1440p while keeping super cool and super quiet thanks to the patented Twin Frozer 7 thermal design. To learn more, click the link in the description below. So all jokes aside, this does look a little bit like a fish tank, and a server case has actually had a little bit of a love child. But this is the Thermaltake Level 20 HT. So it's their latest chassis, and it kind of works on the success of the Tower 900 that you may remember Thermaltake releasing quite a few years ago as kind of, I guess, a bit of a shrine to your hardware. And I think that's where they're trying to go with this. So it comes in two colors, the black and then the white edition, which Thermaltake brand as the Snow edition. Now, pricing wise, just to get that out of the way straight away, you're looking at £189.99 in the UK for the black edition and £199.99 for the white Snow edition. In the US, you're going to be looking at $199.99 plus taxes and shipping. So talking about the general design of the case, I mean, to start with, as Donald Trump would say, it's huge. It's big, it's huge, it's great. But really, it is absolutely massive. I mean, I'm hoping that the camera can kind of pick up the grand scheme of things, but to sort of go through, I guess, some of the main features. As I mentioned, it's based on the Tower 900, and it has got 4 tempered glass side panels. So we've got one on each side. There's actually a smaller one on top, and then also one on the front of the case. Now, due to its sheer size, it is going to be aimed at people wanting to do custom loop water cooling. Honestly speaking, I think if you were to put something in here with an air cooler, even something large like a Noctua D15, it's still just, well, it's going to look silly. Now, it does actually support up to eTeknix motherboards, which is a bit surprising. I would have expected it to maybe accept up to the EEB form factor, like the Asus Dominus and the other sort of chipset boards based around that from the likes of Gigabyte with their dual sockets and so forth. But yeah, we have eATX support, and the motherboard is actually rotated, and we will jump into that in a little bit. But let's focus a little bit more on the outside. So on the outside, they have actually split the I/O panel up a little bit. So we have connectors on the left as well as on the right. So starting with the left, we do have 2 USB 2.0 ports and 2 USB 3.0 ports, as well as obviously the latest Type-C connector. On the right-hand side, that's where we'll find our power button, reset button, LEDs, and also your HD audio jacks for your microphone and headphones. Now, the coolest thing about this chassis is basically the fact that the sides can be taken off. And when I'm talking about the sides, I'm talking about every side. So to start with, on the right hand side, it has a glass panel which is 4mm tempered glass, and when you actually swing it out, you can then consequently take it off. And it does actually have a little bit of a locking mechanism on there as well. So it isn't kind of key operated like a server case. Like I joked earlier, this is a bit like a kind of server case, but it does give you the flexibility to kind of lock it and easily open it when you need to. And it's exactly the same on the other side. We can take this side off, and again, it's on a hinged system, so we can simply take the glass off and remove it, which gives us kind of full access to both sides. So moving around to the front, again, we have 4mm tempered glass, a subtle kind of Thermaltake logo down the front. But once your system's in there with the motherboard and your pumps and kind of your whole custom loop, things are gonna, look amazing from every single angle. Now, this whole front panel is removable. You simply press a button, it kind of swings out. It's not the greatest mechanism, I've got to be honest, because I'd kind of expect it to kind of, snap back in place, but instead you have to actually hold the button down again to kind of lock it into place. And then when you press it again, it doesn't always kind of swing out. But like I said, it is easily removable. Now, also, you will notice on the front that there are these 2 strips, one running down either side, which are for ventilation, because as you can imagine, a case that has glass on pretty much every panel is more than likely going to struggle with ventilation. So by having these, just gives you that extra bit of airflow, and it does have these kind of removable mesh filters on there as well. There is also a mesh filter down the bottom, which again can be removed and does aid in airflow. And there is actually quite a lot of gap down here for air to kind of get under the case and to be sucked in there. So the only other glass panel on the whole case is going to be on the top. Now, the top's actually quite interesting. It does have 2 little arrows, which if you push the glass kind of near to the arrows, it is meant to kind of pop up. So again, we can take the top panel off, and this is where it kind of gives us access to the rear I/O, to the power supply, and to the 2 pre-installed fans. Now it's worth noting this case can actually fit up to 10 fans in it in total, and I will go through kind of where these locations are and what sizes you're actually able to fit inside. So inside the top are 2 pre-installed fans. They're not RGB, but to be honest, where they are, you're probably not even gonna notice them anyway, because I'd actually expect this chassis to be kind of put onto your desk. So unless you are 7 foot tall, you're simply not going to see into the top of it. And obviously you are going to see sort of all your cables and stuff, because that is exactly where the rear I/O is, with kind of, I guess, the rear I/O of your motherboard, your expansion brackets, and also your power supply. So it's not going to be, I guess, the neatest, tidiest area. Luckily, the glass is ever so slightly smoked, so that does kind of hide it away just a little bit. There is also 2 dust filter panels up here as well, which are actually pretty simple to remove. They have kind of 2 little catches. Once you remove it, again, you have this kind of metal mesh dust filter. So you can easily clean it, take it off, and do what you have to do. It also means that you can hide some of your cables underneath this on the top, just to make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Now on the top, this is where I mentioned that the power supply can be installed, and it does actually have a removable bracket, which makes it nice and easy to fit that to your power supply and simply slide it in, back into place, and screw it back down. Now in terms of the expansion brackets on here, you have to admit it is a very, very large case. So normally you'd expect 7 expansion slots. This actually has a whopping 8. So even though your motherboard might not support it, you may have some extra kind of I/O devices that you may want to put in there, which don't actually connect into the motherboard using a PCI Express slot, or again, for those larger motherboards using the eATX form factor. So I guess the only panel on the whole case that isn't made out of glass is the rear, which, as you can see, does have a removable magnetic dust filter, and it does give us access to some extra fan space. Now, to actually remove this panel, it does involve using the 4 thumb screws. I don't know why they kind of use thumb screws, because they are actually put on there quite tight. So therefore, to get it off, you do have to actually use a screwdriver. As you can see, quite tight, but it does look like the screws are captive, which is quite nice. It means that you're not going to lose them. And while I am looking at the back, it is worth mentioning these 2 cutouts at the top, which is perfect for when you've got everything plugged in, your DisplayPort cables, your power cables, your USB, everything can come out of these 2 ports, left or right, giving you flexibility as to if you want it on this side of your desk or the other side. Now, once we remove this panel, which is made out of sort of complete steel, it's actually made out of SPCC steel. It's quite thick, it's quite durable, it doesn't really flex too much. It does give us full access to the rear chamber, which is where we're going to put in sort of hard drives, the power supply is going to be situated, access to the rear of the motherboard, and also radiator space. So moving around and looking at the bottom of the case, as you can see, we have 4 very kind of industrial sized feet on there. The weird thing is though, they've decided to go with kind of a soft, I don't know, like sponge. It just feels a little bit cheap. I would have honestly preferred rubber on there instead of the sponge. I don't know why they've gone with that. Now there are 2 removable magnetic dust filters, one here, which is slightly larger, and a slightly smaller one. So when you actually look at it, this one is perfect for radiators and fans, and we will sort of talk through the inside of the case and exactly sort of what we can do in terms of radiator space and also fan space. So once pretty much every panel is removed, you can see, I guess, the sheer size of what's going on and how much flexibility and room you'd have. I guess for people who are going to be doing water cooling, it's going to be perfect because you could literally get in from any angle you so wish. Now, I'm going to be honest, as I mentioned earlier, if you were to put in a rig here with an air cooler, even one of the sort of larger ones on the market, like the Noctua D15, which comes in at 165mm with a fan installed, I mean, it's pretty much going to come to about here. It's going to look absolutely ridiculous. I guess with an AIO, it could work, but again, I just don't feel you're really going to be harnessing the true potential of this case, which, as I mentioned earlier as well, is based off the Tower 900, which was all about custom loop. It kind of works a little bit like a showcase, and you can see that pretty much abundantly clear from the inside of the case. We do have these brackets on here for your kind of pump res combos, and also a bracket down here for a single 2.5-inch SSD, which honestly, you might think looks a little bit out of place at first, but thinking about the likes of Team Group, who have their RGB SSDs, it's gonna fit absolutely perfectly in here, really being kind of front and center and showing off what the system's all about. Now, talking about the interior, it is all black. Obviously, there is a snow edition as well, which is going to differ ever so slightly, but I can't really comment too much on that because I haven't actually got it here with me. But you will notice, because it is all black, it just means that everything kind of, looks pretty uniform, and you can go with any kind of color scheme or theme that you want. Especially if you are using a custom loop, you could go with blue, red, anything that kind of fits what you want to do. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the motherboard sort of tray and motherboard support, it does have support for eATX. I would have liked to have seen EEB support, especially considering the size of the chassis. But the thing I love about this the most is that it has 4 thumb screws. Sadly, they're not captive. But once you remove them 4 thumb screws, you can see the motherboard tray itself can be removed. So you can basically prep your board as much as you physically can before installing it. So this is going to obviously be motherboard, getting your CPU in there, the back plate, and there is an extremely large sort of cutout for your CPU socket backplate. You will also find that you can put your CPU block on there and basically have everything prepped up and ready to go. Especially if you're doing some kind of mod, then I guess this is perfect for that, because it is all about showcasing your system. If you could do some kind of modification, then it allows you to kind of do it without having to do it inside the chassis. Now, the motherboard tray isn't the only one that's removable. You can actually remove this cable routing hole sort of bracket, which sits ever so slightly just below the motherboard tray. And the beauty of being able to remove that, if you simply don't need the cable routing holes, then you can actually move the vertical bracket, which is currently situated down below for radiators, and you could put it on there, which is going to be perfect for showcasing radiators with some nice RGB fans, or even the DP100 distro plate that Thermaltake make that would fit in there perfectly because it is a 360mm bracket. Now, the only thing I'm a little bit kind of weirded out by, I guess, is the fact that on the motherboard tray, you do have these cutouts. Personally, I don't know why they didn't just do one sort of large rubber cutout, because what you actually find is with the majority of motherboards, once it's installed on there, the 24 pin, instead of being lined up with this one, it's situated bang in the middle, which is really frustrating if you're using the likes of custom cables, like I normally use from Simple Sleeving, which kind of have, I guess, not much give on them because of the quality of the material and how kind of tight the bend is on them. It's just not going to line up perfectly, which is really, really frustrating. Like I mentioned, I would have personally preferred one large rubber mounting, kind of goes all the way through, so you can kind of, I guess, sleeve it through any way that you want. Now, going back to the case, there is plenty of other sort of cutouts for various different connectors. So if you imagine the way that the motherboard's going to be sort of put in there, and we'll put some B-roll so you can see exactly how things will look. But you have got these cutouts sort of here and also over here for, I guess, fan headers, CPU fan headers, as well as your EPS 8-pin, 4-pin, or 8+4. Now, the only sad thing about it is there literally is no area on the motherboard tray, or really this is only the kind of closest area for the likes of your HD audio connectors and things like that. And I just feel that once your motherboard's in there, it's quite a way to go from here over to sort of where the motherboard connectors will be for your HD audio and also your front panel USB. Now, when your motherboard's actually inside the case on the rotated motherboard tray, it does mean that your GPU is going to be sitting vertically, which is perfect if you're kind of viewing it from, I guess, this side. I guess the only sad thing is, depending on the side of your desk that you're actually going to have the case, will depend on if you're, I guess, going to see the front of the GPU or the back plate of the GPU. I wish maybe there was something that, I don't know, maybe could be done with the top panel to kind of rotate it around another way, just so you can kind of get the flexibility of having it on either side of your desk. Now, talking about your GPU, I want to mention that if you aren't using the panel down below with sort of a radiator and a fan setup, which is obviously going to take up quite a lot of room, then you have got the flexibility to put in up to 400mm graphics cards, which is absolutely ridiculous, because just having a quick Google around, the longest graphics card on the market at the moment is the 2080 Ti Lightning Z from MSI, which comes in at 328mm. Sadly, I haven't got one in to hand, but I have got a 2080 Gaming X, which comes in at 327mm, just to kind of give you, I guess, a rough guide of how it's going to look in the grand scheme of things. Now, the other clearance that I want to mention about, I did speak about the Noctua D15 earlier. As I mentioned, that comes in at 165mm with the fan installed. Well, on this case, you are going to have a whopping 260mm of space to deal with. So, like I mentioned, it's going to look rather silly. Now the beauty of this case as well is that it does have flexibility options. So on the rear chamber, you can actually take off all the hard drive cages and flip it over to the other side and then take the radiator bracket and put it on this side. So that means, again, it can kind of add to the aesthetics that you're trying to work with, depending on which side of maybe the desk that you have it on and so forth. Now, the beauty of that as well is kind of the amount of fans and everything that you can fit in here. So you can actually fit up to 10 fans in total. We already mentioned the two up to 140 mil on top, but let's talk about some of the other fan options. So with that flexible bracket, it does mean that you can fit up to 3 120 mil fans or up to 2 140 mil. Now for radiator support, that means you can fit a single 360 mil rad, and to be honest, you should have pretty much no problem with any thickness 360 mil rad you can get on the market today. So pretty much you can go nuts, especially on this rear bracket. On obviously the one down here, where you can fit another 120 mil fans or a 360 mil rad or 2 140 mil fans, you are obviously going to be restricted by the height of your fans and also how far your GPU is going to come down. But in all honesty, I don't think you're going to have too many problems due to that massive GPU clearance. The only other fans that you can fit inside this case, as we showed you earlier on that sort of rear panel, is up to 2 120 mil or 2 140 mil fans, acting, I guess, as a little bit of an exhaust. I don't know how much airflow there's actually going to be in this rear chamber, but it does look pretty plentiful, so you might actually be surprised. If it was me personally, I'd probably populate this with as many fans as I physically could and just ramp down the fan settings so that they operate at a nice kind of low and slow methodology, and therefore it would reduce acoustics as well as, you know, keeping things nice and cool. As I said, this case is aimed at water cooling, especially custom loop, but there's a few little niggly things. For a case that's kind of aimed at, I guess, custom loop, there is no fill port, there is no drain port. So I would have personally liked to have seen maybe something up by the IO on this side or the other side, or just somewhere near the top, as well as something, I guess, towards the rear on the bottom, just so you can kind of get that whole system going of opening up, letting some air in, doing a valve and draining out your whole system, making it nice and easy. But I can maybe see why they haven't gone down that route, because you have so much room, you can probably get away with kind of, you know, maneuvering it to your ability and fitting your own drain port in, using some flexi tubing in the rear chamber so that it's out of sight and out of mind. Now going back to the rear chamber, we do have a hard drive cage, which if you don't want to use it and you want kind of, I guess, extra room for power supplies, you can remove it completely. Now talking about the power supply, it will actually fit up with the hard drive cages, power supplies up to 200 mil in length. Obviously you have to remember the way that your cables are going to kind of come down. If you were to remove this, you could fit larger power supplies. Looking around sort of the market, Thermaltake's largest power supply will fit in there absolutely perfectly. You just have to be warned that you will have to remove the cages if you're going to go for something like the Supernova from EVGA in their 600 watt variant, because it is just going to be that little bit too long. It is worth noting that once you do have a power supply fitted, if you've decided to put the radiator onto that opposite side, you are going to struggle with the thickness of the rad and the fans. In terms of the hard drive cages though, it does give you the flexibility to install up to 4 2.5 inch drives or 4 3.5 inch drives. So really it's entirely up to you. But remember, we do have that single SSD mount on the front. And personally, I think that the way that things are heading at the moment, more people are going to be going over to M.2 due to the price and the performance that you get for your money. So going back to pricing now that we've looked at the whole case, $189.99 in the UK for the black, $199.99 for the white snow edition, and then in the United States of America, $199.99 it seems for both models. Obviously this is pricing before the launch, so you know, go check it out from your retailers, and we will try to link to that in the description below. Now that we know the pricing, now that we've seen the case, is it worth it? Well, in all honesty, I think for the average user, no, it's completely and utterly pointless. But for the people who are going to make the use of it, absolutely. It's massive, it's huge. It looks like, as I said earlier, a kind of an amalgamation between a server case and a fish tank. But I can see why it's been done. I really, really can. It looks absolutely amazing. I'm sure when it's built up, it looks even better. Having kind of two reses over here, you could have maybe two different loops, one for the GPU, one for the CPU, you know, RGB SSD down here, lots of flashy lights, you could put strips into it. You could really make it look like an absolute shrine and a homage to your whole system. And I'm sure as your friends come round to, you know, see you and they see the system in the corner of the room, sort of just sitting there glowing, it's definitely going to get people talking. And in all honesty, I think for the value, it's actually extremely well priced. 189 sort of pounds, $199. You get a lot for that. You got to remember, we've got essentially a lot of panels that are made out of 4mm tempered glass. The rest of it is steel. The only real kind of plastic on it is on the corner where you can't sort of get away with having curved material, so you have to use plastic. But for the majority of it, it's made out of steel. It's heavy, it's robust, and I don't know, that's what I like about it, I guess. Let me know in the comments section below, is this something you'd buy or is it just complete overkill? I think, in all honesty, when I go to CES in January or even Computex, I'm gonna see a lot of systems using this case purely because they want to show off their hardware. So if anything, even if the consumers don't buy it, I don't know, maybe other brands will, just to show off their graphics cards, their SSDs, their other bits and bobs, shall we say. There you go, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully I didn't miss anything out. And remember, let me know in the comments section below if you actually want to see me maybe do a full time-lapse build in this, because we were a little bit kind of restricted for time, but I think we got through it, and I don't think I left anything out. Hopefully I didn't. I'm sure you guys will let me know. I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye. You are going to have a whopping 400mm for GPUs. GPUs.